I was running. Not in the literal sense, of course. My Louboutins weren't made for it, and the custom-tailored suit I wore was more of a cage than clothing. I was running in the way a CEO runs, by delegating my own implosion and driving a ludicrously expensive German sports car into the middle of nowhere, hoping the sheer velocity would outpace the shrapnel of my life. It was a fool's errand. The shrapnel, it turned out, was lodged deep inside me. The car died as if on cue, a final, sputtering cough of protest against the indignity of it all. One moment I was doing 120 on a ribbon of asphalt cutting through an endless expanse of Oregon pine. The next I was coasting into silence. The engine, a masterpiece of engineering I'd paid a small fortune for, was utterly, profoundly dead. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Hilaire Vance, who had built a tech empire on the principle of flawless execution, was stranded by a failure of mechanics. For 10 minutes, I sat in the leather-scented quiet, gripping the steering wheel. The silence outside was absolute, broken only by the whisper of wind in the towering trees. It was a sound I hadn't heard in years, a sound that didn't compute in the concrete canyons of my city. There was no signal on my phone. Of course there wasn't. The universe was not without a sense of humor. I had spent the last decade ensuring the world was seamlessly connected, and here I was, an island. Pride warred with panic. I could wait. Someone would eventually come along. But the sun was beginning to dip, painting the sky in bruised shades of orange and purple, and a chill was creeping into the air. My empire hadn't been built on waiting. It had been built on action, on bending the world to my will. But the world, out here, didn't seem to care about my will. It was vast and indifferent and smelled of damp earth and pine needles. After an hour that felt like a year, a pair of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, growing steadily. A truck. Not a sleek, modern pickup, but an old, hulking beast with a tow rig. Its paint faded to a dull, indeterminate color. It pulled up behind me, its headlights bathing my useless car in a yellow, judging glare. A man climbed out. He was tall, broad in the shoulders, and moved with an unhurried economy that spoke of a life spent with heavy things. He wore grease-stained jeans and a plain gray Henley that strained across his chest. His face, when he came to my window, was calm, his features strong and defined under the shadow of a worn baseball cap. He wasn't what I expected, though I couldn't have said what I had been expecting. He tapped on the glass. I powered down the window. The electronic were sounding obscenely loud in the quiet. Car trouble. His voice was a low baritone, calm and steady. The engine just stopped, I said, the words feeling inadequate. I sounded like a child. He nodded, his gaze sweeping over the car. Then me. There was no awe, no recognition, just a quiet assessment. He walked to the front of the car, and I popped the hood from inside. He spent a few minutes peering into the complex, plastic-shrouded guts of the engine. His large, calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he checked connections. Finally, he straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag he pulled from his back pocket. "It's not starting here," he said, stating the obvious without a hint of condescension. "I can tow you to my shop. It's in Pine Ridge, about 20 miles back." My shoulders slumped in defeat. Fine. Whatever it takes. The process of hooking my state-of-the-art vehicle to his ancient-looking rig was an exercise in humiliation. I stood by the side of the road, arms crossed, feeling useless and exposed. When he was done, he gestured to the passenger door of his truck. "You can ride with me." The cab smelled of coffee, metal, and something faintly sweet, like sawdust. It was cluttered but clean. A child's drawing of a lopsided rainbow was taped to the dashboard. "What do you think is wrong with it?" I asked, my voice tight. I needed a diagnosis, a plan, a timeline. Control. He glanced at me, his dark eyes unreadable in the dim light. "Could be a lot of things. Fuel pump, alternator, maybe the timing belt snapped. I won't know till I get it on the lift." "And how long will that take?" "To diagnose? Not long. To fix?" He shrugged. "Depends what it is. And depends on parts. A car like this." He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Parts for your fancy city car don't grow on trees out here. Frustration, sharp and acidic, clawed its way up my throat. This was the culmination of the worst week of my life. A hostile takeover I'd narrowly fended off. A relationship with my business partner that had detonated in spectacular fashion. And now this. Stuck in the middle of nowhere, at the mercy of a small-town mechanic. The sheer injustice of it was overwhelming. Look, I snapped, the word sharper than I intended. I need it fixed. Tonight. I will pay whatever it costs. He was silent for a long moment, his eyes on the road. The only sound was the rumble of the truck's diesel engine. When he finally spoke, his voice was still infuriatingly calm. Ma'am, money can't make a new alternator materialize out of thin air. It's almost 7 o'clock on a Friday. The nearest dealership that might stock a part for this is in Portland. That's a 3-hour drive, and they won't be open till Monday. Monday? The word was a strangled whisper. No, that's not possible. He glanced at me again, a flicker of something. Pity? Annoyance? In his eyes. It's the way it is. The dam of my control broke. All the anger and fear and humiliation of the past week crested, and I unleashed it on the only available target. This is ridiculous, I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. It's just an engine, a machine. It's not magic. I gestured vaguely back toward my car, a symbol of everything that was supposed to work, everything that was supposed to be perfect. Just fix the damn thing. I don't know, work a miracle. The words tumbled out, reckless and condescending. Fix this engine by morning, and I'll marry you. Deal? The moment the words left my mouth, I wished I could snatch them back. The joke, if it could be called that, landed with a thud in the close confines of the cab. It was arrogant, dismissive, a perfect encapsulation of the person I was terrified I'd become. He didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He just kept driving, his large hands steady on the wheel. He looked at me, a long, slow appraisal that made my skin prickle with heat. He saw me, not the CEO, not the woman in the expensive suit, but the spoiled, panicked creature lashing out from a place of fear. "We'll be at the shop in 15 minutes, was all he said, his voice flat. And in his quiet, profound dismissal, I felt a shame more potent than any shouting match could have elicited. The deal I'd so flippantly offered hung in the air between us, an ugly, glittering monument to my own foolishness. The garage was exactly what you'd expect. A 2-bay concrete block building smelling of oil and old tires. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the organized chaos within. Tools lined the walls on pegboards, their outlines drawn in marker like a fastidious ghost. Marcus maneuvered the tow truck with practiced ease, unhitching my car and rolling it into an empty bay. "All right," he said, turning to me. "Let's see what we've got." I stood in the doorway, feeling profoundly out of place. My heels kept threatening to catch on the oil-stained floor. He ignored me, his focus entirely on the car. He worked with a quiet intensity that was almost hypnotic. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. His hands, which I'd noticed before, were fascinating. They were large and scarred, the knuckles scraped, the nails permanently rimmed with grease, but they moved with the precision of a surgeon's. He had the car on the lift and the plastic engine cover off in minutes. "Well, there's your problem," he said after a while, pointing with a long screwdriver. Timing belts shredded. I stared at the mangled strip of rubber he indicated. It meant nothing to me. "Is that bad?" He gave me a look that was perilously close to a smile, but it didn't quite get there. "It's not good. When it goes, it can cause a lot of internal damage. Bent valves, damaged pistons. Best case, it's just the belt. Worst case, you're looking at a new engine." My stomach plummeted. "And the best case? How long does that take? To replace the belt? A few hours of labor." He wiped his hands on the ever-present rag. "But like I said, I don't have the part. It's a dealer-only item for this model. Monday at the earliest, and that's if I can even get one shipped here. Might have to go get it myself." "Monday?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash. I ran a hand through my hair, my composure fraying at the edges. There's a hotel in this. Pine Ridge. There's a motel, he corrected gently. The Pine Cone Inn. But I wouldn't recommend it. And there's a storm coming in tonight. Supposed to be a bad one. Roads might be iffy in the morning, he paused, his gaze steady. I have a spare room. The offer hung in the air, a lifeline I was too proud to take. I couldn't possibly impose. It's not an imposition. My house is just behind the garage. It's warm and the roof doesn't leak. It's a better option than the pine cone. He wasn't pleading, just stating facts. The choice was mine. Panic and pride had another brief, vicious skirmish in my gut. The thought of the Pine Cone Inn, with its implied stained carpets and flickering neon sign, was grim. The thought of accepting charity from this man, after the way I'd spoken to him, was worse. But the wind was picking up outside, rattling the big garage door, and the sky had turned a deep, bruised purple. He was right about the storm. Are you sure? I asked, the words feeling small. I wouldn't have offered if I wasn't, he said simply. Grab your things. I'll lock up. I retrieved my overnight bag from the trunk, its buttery leather feeling absurd in this context. It contained $300 face cream and silk pajamas. I felt like a caricature. As I followed him out the back of the garage, the first fat drops of rain began to fall, splatting against the gravel path. His house was a simple, two-story clapboard structure, with a wide front porch and a swing. It looked like it had been there for 100 years, weathered but solid. Inside, it was warm and filled with the scent of baking bread and lemon cleaner. The floors were worn hardwood, covered in places with colorful woven rugs. A half-finished puzzle was spread out on a coffee table, and a stack of children's books sat next to a comfortable-looking armchair. It was a home, a real lived-in, loved-in home. Maya, he called out. I'm home. A little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, came skidding into the hall from what looked like the kitchen. She had her father's dark eyes and a cloud of beautiful, coily hair pulled back in a bright pink scrunchie. She was wearing a flour-dusted apron over a t-shirt with a sparkly unicorn on it. She stopped short when she saw me, her eyes wide. Who's that? This is Alara, he said, the name sounding strange in his mouth. Her car broke down. She's going to be staying with us for a couple of days until I can fix it. Alara, this is my daughter, Maya. Hi, Maya said, her voice shy. She hid halfway behind her father's leg. Hello, Maya, I said, trying to smile. I was terrible with children. They were unpredictable variables, immune to logic and quarterly reports. I was making cookies, Maya announced to her dad. For after dinner. I smell them. They smell great, he crouched down to her level. Why don't you go wash up? I'll show Alara the guest room and then we can eat. She nodded and scurried away. He straightened up and looked at me. Sorry, I should have mentioned. It's just the two of us. It's your home, I said quickly. You don't have to apologize. He led me up a creaking staircase to a small, simple room at the back of the house. It held a double bed with a handmade quilt, a wooden dresser, and a single window that looked out over a dark, rain-swept yard. The bathroom's just across the hall, he said, lingering in the doorway. Make yourself at home. Dinner's in about half an hour, if you're hungry. Thank you, I said, and the words were wholly inadequate. Thank you, Marcus. I'd read the name on his uniform shirt patch earlier. Using it felt like a small step toward acknowledging him as a person, not just a functionary in my disaster. He just nodded and pulled the door partially closed, leaving me alone. I sank onto the edge of the bed. The quilt was soft beneath my hands, the product of countless hours of patient work. The room was quiet, insulated from the growing storm outside. It was the antithesis of my life, of my gleaming, minimalist apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows and its crushing emptiness. I was a guest here, an intruder, and for the first time in a very long time, I had absolutely no idea what to do next. I changed out of my suit and into the only casual clothes I'd packed. A pair of black leggings and a cashmere sweater. Still felt like a costume. When I came downstairs, the table was set for 3. Marcus was pulling a lasagna from the oven, and the smell was incredible. Maya was carefully placing her slightly burnt on the bottom cookies onto a plate. The scene was so profoundly domestic it felt like something from a movie. Dinner was a quiet affair. I was hyper-aware of my own stiffness, the way I held my fork, the way I sat perfectly straight in my chair. Marcus and Maya had an easy rhythm, a shorthand of shared looks and inside jokes. He'd ask about her day, and she'd chatter about a spelling test and a fight with her best friend, Amelia. He listened with an attentiveness that I, who regularly chaired board meetings with 20 people, found I couldn't muster. "Alara doesn't talk much," Maya observed bluntly, pointing her fork at me. "Maya," Marcus chided gently. "It's okay," I said, a faint blush heating my cheeks. I've had a long day." "Her car exploded," Maya informed her lasagna. "It didn't explode," Marcus corrected. "It just broke. It's a very fancy car," she continued, looking at me. "Is it fast?" "It was," I said, a wry smile touching my lips for the first time. "Not so much anymore." After dinner, I insisted on helping with the dishes. It was a clumsy attempt to repay some small part of the debt I was accumulating. Marcus didn't protest, just handed me a dish towel. We worked in silence. The only sounds the clink of plates and the drumming of rain against the kitchen window. It was a comfortable silence, not the tense one from the truck. Standing beside him, passing him wet plates to dry, I was aware of his size, of the solid, reassuring presence of him in the warm, small space. He was a big man, but he moved with a surprising grace. Everything about him seemed deliberate and calm. I found myself watching his hands as he dried a plate, the way his fingers, stained with the day's work, carefully handled the delicate ceramic. These were the hands that had diagnosed my car's failure, the hands that had built this life, that tucked his daughter into bed at night. They were capable hands. "You have a lovely home," I said, needing to fill the quiet. "It's home," he said with a shrug. "Been in my family for a few generations. My granddad built the garage. You grew up here." "Mostly. Moved away for a while. Came back." He didn't elaborate. There was a story there, a closed door I didn't feel I had the right to knock on. I was an observer, a ghost at the feast of their lives. I watched him help Maya with a tricky part of her puzzle, his large frame folded onto the floor beside her. I saw the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, a pure, unguarded love that made something ache in my chest. I had power, I had wealth, I had influence. I could buy and sell companies before breakfast. But I didn't have this quiet, solid thing that was a life. Later, as the storm outside intensified, the lights flickered once, twice, and then died, plunging the house into blackness. "Oops," Maya said from the living room. "Stay put, sweetie," Marcus called out. His voice was calm, unfazed. "Generator will kick on in a second for the essentials. But I've got candles." A moment later, I could see the faint outline of his shape moving through the dark. He returned with a handful of thick pillar candles and a lighter. Soon, the living room was filled with a warm, flickering glow. The power outage, instead of being an inconvenience, had made the space even more intimate, shrinking the world down to the small circle of light in which we sat. The wind howled outside, and rain lashed against the windows, but in here, it was safe. It was warm. Marcus settled into the armchair. Maya curled at his feet, leaning against his legs as she read a book by candlelight. I sat on the sofa, clutching a mug of tea he'd made for me before the power went out. The fire he'd built earlier in the hearth crackled and popped, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The scene was so peaceful it was almost painful. It was a portrait of a life I couldn't imagine for myself, and the contrast with the chaos I just fled was a physical blow. My phone was a useless brick. My laptop was in my bag, equally dead. My entire world, the digital empire I commanded from a glass tower, had been reduced to nothing. There were no emails to answer, no calls to field, no fires to put out. There was just the storm, the firelight, and the quiet presence of this man and his child. The silence stretched, filled only by the sounds of the house and the weather. It wasn't empty. It was full. I thought about my apartment, how I sometimes turned on the television just for the noise, how the silence there felt like an accusation. Here it felt like a bomb. "You okay?" Marcus's voice was low, pulling me from my thoughts. He was looking at me, his expression softened by the firelight. Maya had fallen asleep, her book slipping from her fingers. I hadn't realized I was crying. Not sobbing, just silent tears tracking down my cheeks. I quickly wiped them away with the back of my hand. Embarrassed. "Yes, I'm fine. Just tired." He didn't press. He didn't offer platitudes or awkward reassurances. He just nodded, his gaze gentle. "It gets loud out there," he said, nodding toward the window, but I knew he wasn't talking about the storm. Sometimes you need a quiet place to wait it out. His simple understanding was more disarming than any interrogation could have been. The carefully constructed walls I maintained around myself, the ones that had been under siege for weeks, suddenly felt brittle, fragile. A single, honest question might bring them down. "I think I broke my life," I whispered, the confession escaping before I could stop it. The words hung in the warm air, shockingly vulnerable. I hadn't said it out loud to anyone, not even myself. He didn't flinch. He just watched me, the firelight catching the deep, steady brown of his eyes. He picked up the sleeping Maya, her small body limp and trusting in his arms. "Most things can be fixed," he said softly, his voice a low rumble. "Sometimes they just need a new part, a little time, and a patient mechanic." He carried his daughter up the stairs, leaving me alone in the flickering light. I stared into the fire, the heat warming my face. Most things can be fixed. It was a simple idea, from a simple man, but it landed in the hollow space in my chest with the weight of a revelation. I had thought my life was a sealed unit, a complex machine that, once broken, was ruined forever. But he spoke of it like an engine, something that could be understood, taken apart, and put back together. Maybe not the same as it was before, maybe with a few new scars, but functional, whole. And for the first time in a long time, a tiny, fragile flicker of something that felt like hope ignited within me. The next morning, the world was washed clean. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky of pale, cloudless blue and the fresh, earthy scent of rain-soaked pine. The power was back on. I woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, sounds of life I wasn't used to. When I went downstairs, Marcus was at the stove, and Maya was at the table, diligently drawing on a piece of paper. "Morning," he said, turning from a sizzling pan. "Sleep okay?" "Yes, thank you," I had. Deeper than I had in months, cocooned in the quiet of the small room. "Daddy's gonna fix your car today," Maya announced. "He can fix anything." Marcus just smiled, a faint dusting of color on his high cheekbones. "Well, I can try. The roads are clear. I'm gonna drive into Portland to get that part. Should be back by early afternoon." "You're driving to Portland?" I asked, surprised. "That's a 6-hour round trip. It's the only way to get it done today," he said with a shrug, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You're welcome to hang out here while I'm gone. Maya's got a friend coming over for a bit, but otherwise, I can't ask you to do that," I said, feeling a fresh wave of guilt. "All that driving, for me. It's my job," he said, turning back to the bacon. "It's what you're paying me for," but his tone was kind. We both knew this went beyond a simple transaction. While he was gone, I felt a strange sense of restlessness. The house was quiet. Maya's friend, Amelia, arrived, and they disappeared into the backyard, their high-pitched giggles floating in through the open kitchen window. I tried to read a book from the shelf in the living room, but I couldn't focus. I felt like a guest who had overstayed their welcome, a foreign object in this well-ordered world. I wandered out the back door. The yard was large and a little wild, ending in a thick stand of trees. There was a vegetable garden in one corner, the plants heavy with morning dew. A sturdy, hand-built woodshed stood against the back of the garage. I saw a pile of logs and an axe resting against a large chopping block. On impulse, I walked over to it. Back in the city, I paid a premium for a gym membership where I ran on a treadmill facing a wall of televisions. I lifted sterile, rubber-coated weights. It was about performance, optimization, control. This was different. This was work. Real work. I picked up a log, surprised by its weight, and placed it on the block. I lifted the axe. It was heavier than I expected, the wooden handle smooth and worn. I swung. The blade bit into the wood off-center, and the axe handle vibrated jarringly in my hands. The log just sat there, mocking me. I tried again, putting my shoulders into it, mimicking a movement I'd only ever seen in movies. This time the axe head sank a few inches into the wood, but it was a clumsy, ineffective blow. Frustration prickled at me. It looked so simple. I spent the next hour wrestling with the woodpile. I was clumsy, inefficient, and sweating through my expensive sweater. But with every swing, a piece of the tension coiling in my gut seemed to loosen. The physical effort was a release. I wasn't thinking about my company or my ex or the mess I'd made. I was thinking only about the weight of the axe, the grain of the wood, the clean, sharp smell of split pine. By the time I saw Marcus's truck pull in, I had managed to split a small, respectable pile of firewood. I was also filthy, my hands were raw, and my arms ached. He got out of the truck, holding a long cardboard box, and stopped when he saw me. He took in the scene, me, sweaty and disheveled, the axe, the pile of split wood, and a slow smile spread across his face. It was the first real, unguarded smile he'd given me, and it transformed his entire expression, lighting up his eyes. "Looks like you've been busy," he said, his voice laced with amusement. "I was bored," I said, feeling ridiculously self-conscious. He set the box down and walked over, picking up one of my split logs. He turned it over in his hands. "Not bad," he said. "For a beginner." He looked at my hands, which I quickly hid behind my back. "Let me see." Reluctantly, I showed him. My palms were red and angry, with a blister already forming on my right thumb. He winced in sympathy. "Yeah, that'll happen. Come on." He led me into the house, to the kitchen sink, and gently turned on the cold water, guiding my hands under the stream. His touch was incredibly gentle. His large, rough fingers barely brushed my skin, but I felt it like a brand. The cool water soothed the sting, but a different kind of heat was blooming in my chest. He was standing so close I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell the faint scent of engine oil and the clean, outdoor smell of him. "You need to learn to let the axe do the work," he said, his voice a low murmur. "It's about technique, not just force." He turned off the water and carefully dried my hands with a soft towel, his movements deliberate and focused. He kept holding my right hand, his thumb stroking softly over my palm, just below the blister. My breath hitched. The air in the kitchen grew thick, charged with a sudden, palpable energy. The easy, platonic space we had occupied was gone. In its place was an electric, humming awareness. I looked up at him, and his eyes were dark, intense, fixed on my face. The amusement was gone, replaced by something deeper, more serious. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This was the moment, the turn, the instant a story changes from one thing into another. His gaze dropped to my mouth. He was going to kiss me. I knew it. And God, I wanted him to. I wanted to close the small distance between us, to feel the steady strength of him, to lose myself in something real and solid. But then the back door slammed open. "Daddy, look!" Amelia and I made a fort. Maya burst into the kitchen, her face flushed with excitement. The spell shattered. Marcus dropped my hand as if it were hot, taking a half-step back. The space between us was suddenly a chasm again. A blush crept up his neck. "That's great, sweetie," he said, his voice a little rough. I've got to go fix Alara's car." He turned and practically fled the kitchen, grabbing the parts box on his way out. I was left standing at the sink, my hands still tingling, my heart still racing. The moment was gone, but the echo of it remained, a shimmering, undeniable presence in the air. Nothing had happened, and yet, everything had changed. Later, sitting on the porch swing while Marcus worked in the garage, I tried to make sense of the new terrain. The sun was warm on my skin, but I was shivering. Every clang of a tool from the garage, every rev of an engine, made me jump. I was acutely aware of him just 100 feet away, his body bent over the engine of my car, his capable hands making things right. Maya came and sat beside me, swinging her legs. "Are you sad you have to leave soon?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. I don't know. "I hope you don't," she said. "I like having you here. You're quiet." I smiled. "Thank you. I think Daddy's quiet too," she said, as if that explained everything. "He misses Mom. He's been quiet ever since she got sick." The casual, childish revelation landed with the force of a physical blow. Of course, there was a loss there, a grief that explained the reserved set of his shoulders, the deep well of patience in his eyes. He wasn't just a single dad, he was a widower. He was a man who had navigated the ultimate heartbreak and had come out the other side, still standing, still raising his daughter with a gentle strength that humbled me. My own problems, a failed business deal, a soured romance built on ambition instead of affection, seemed petty and insignificant in comparison. I had been running from things I could, with effort, fix or replace. He had endured something irreparable and had built a new life from the ashes. When he finally came to the house, his hands and arms smeared with grease, the sun was setting. "It's done," he announced. The words should have been a relief. They were my ticket out, my freedom. Instead, they felt like a sentence. "The belt is replaced," he continued, wiping his hands on a rag. "I ran a compression test. No damage to the valves. You got lucky." Lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt bereft. The bubble of this strange, quiet weekend was about to burst. Tomorrow I would get in my car and drive away. I would return to my empty apartment, my boardroom battles, my life of carefully curated isolation. The thought was unbearable. "I need to settle up with you," I said, my voice sounding strained to my own ears. "For the toe, the part, your labor, and for everything else." "We can do that in the morning," he said, not looking at me. He was avoiding my eyes. The charged energy from the kitchen was back, thicker than ever. "I need to shower. Dinner will be a little late." He disappeared upstairs. I stood in the living room, the beautiful, tidy space feeling suddenly like a cage. The puzzle on the table, the quilt on the chair, the drawing on the wall. They were all pieces of a life that wasn't mine, a life I was about to be expelled from. I couldn't leave. Not like this. I found him in the garage. He had said he was going to shower, but he was there, leaning against his workbench, staring at my car. The setting sun cast long shadows through the open bay door. My car looked perfect again, a sleek, powerful machine, ready to whisk me away. It looked alien in his garage. "Marcus," I said, my voice quiet. He turned. He had washed his hands and face, but he was still in his work clothes. In the dimming light, his eyes were dark pools of uncertainty. "I wanted to thank you," I started, the words feeling formal and stupid, "for your hospitality. You and Maya have been incredibly kind." "It was nothing," he said, his voice gruff. "No, it wasn't," I insisted, taking a step closer. "It was everything." I took a breath, the air thick with the smell of gasoline and his clean, soapy scent. "I was horrible to you, in the truck. That stupid, arrogant joke I made. You were stressed," he said, dismissing it with a wave of his hand. "No, I was a jerk," I said, needing him to understand. "I'm sorry. I've been a person I don't much like lately, and coming here, seeing you, seeing this life you've built, it's been a wake-up call." He was silent, just watching me. His stillness was unnerving. It demanded honesty. "I don't want to go," I whispered, the admission costing me the last of my pride. The thought of getting in that car tomorrow and driving back to my life. It feels like walking back into a prison. He pushed off the workbench and took a step toward me. Then another. He stopped when he was just an arm's length away. The space between us crackled. "Then don't," he said, his voice a low vibration that I felt in my bones. "It's not that simple," I said, a humorless laugh escaping me. "I have a company to run. A life. Is it a life you want?" he asked, his gaze searing. I had no answer for that. He closed the remaining distance between us. He lifted a hand, not to my face, but to a stray piece of wood chip in my hair, left over from my disastrous attempt at chopping wood. His fingers brushed against my temple, and a jolt went through me. His touch was hesitant, questioning. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. And that was it. That was all it took. The last of my defenses crumbled to dust. I reached up, my hands finding their way to his chest, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart through the soft cotton of his shirt. "Stay," he said again, but this time it wasn't a suggestion. It was a plea. "Just for a little while. See what happens." I looked up at him, at his strong, kind face, at the vulnerability in his dark eyes. I saw the man who could fix an engine, who could raise a daughter alone, who could chop wood and bake bread and meet a stranger's panic with quiet grace. I didn't answer with words. I rose on my toes and pressed my mouth to his. The kiss was hesitant at first, a question. His lips were soft, warm. Then, as my hands tightened on his shirt, he made a sound deep in his chest, and his arms came around me, pulling me tight against him. The hesitation vanished, replaced by a raw, desperate hunger that I met with my own. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was the storm from the night before, breaking inside the quiet garage. It was weeks of my fear and loneliness crashing against his years of grief and solitude. His hands were in my hair, at my waist, holding me as if he was afraid I'd dissolve. I clung to him, my body molded to the hard lines of his. The taste of him was coffee and clean soap and something uniquely, intoxicatingly him. We were a mess of tangled limbs and desperate mouths, and it was the most honest I had been in a decade. When we finally broke for air, we were both breathless. He rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. His breathing was as ragged as my own. "My stupid, stupid deal," I whispered against his lips, thinking of my flippant offer in the truck. A low chuckle rumbled in his chest. "Best deal I ever almost made," he murmured. He kissed me again, slower this time, deeper. It was a kiss of promises, of possibilities. It wasn't about the frantic release of tension anymore. It was about the slow, deliberate building of something new. He scooped me up into his arms as if I weighed nothing, and I wrapped my legs around his waist without a second thought. He carried me out of the garage, leaving my perfectly fixed, useless car behind in the darkness. He carried me through the backyard, into the house that had become a sanctuary, and up the creaking stairs, and for the first time since I'd arrived, I didn't feel like an intruder. I felt like I was finally, truly, coming home. Waking up was a slow, gentle drift into awareness. The first thing I registered was the light. Not the harsh, demanding light of the city, but a soft, milky glow filtering through the thin curtains. The second was the weight. A heavy, warm arm draped protectively over my waist, holding me close. I was tucked against a solid, living wall of heat. The scent of his skin, clean and warm, filled my senses. I turned my head slowly on the pillow. Marcus was asleep, his face relaxed and peaceful in a way I hadn't seen it before. The stern lines of concentration and quiet grief were smoothed away, leaving him looking younger, more vulnerable. A lock of dark hair had fallen across his forehead. Without thinking, I reached out and gently brushed it back. His eyes fluttered open. He looked at me, and a slow, sleepy smile touched his lips. There was no awkwardness, no mourning after regret. There was just a quiet, profound sense of rightness. "Morning," he whispered, his voice thick with sleep. "Morning," I whispered back. He tightened his arm around me, pulling me impossibly closer. I rested my head in the hollow of his shoulder, breathing him in. We lay there in silence for a long time, listening to the house wake up around us, the distant clatter of the furnace, the chirping of birds outside the window. It was the most peaceful I had ever felt. "I should go," I said eventually, the words a lie I felt obligated to tell. He didn't answer right away. His thumb began to trace slow, lazy circles on the bare skin of my hip. The simple, possessive touch sent a shiver through me. "Or," he said, his voice a low rumble against my ear, "you could stay. For breakfast." It was a simple invitation, but it held the weight of 1,000 unsaid things. Stay for the day. Stay for the week. Stay and see what this is. I lifted my head to look at him. "I think I'd like that." His smile widened, reaching his eyes. "Good." The morning unfolded with a gentle, domestic rhythm. We made breakfast together, a comfortable choreography of passing plates and bumping hips in the small kitchen. Maya came down and seemed to accept my presence at the table in her pajamas without question, launching into a detailed story about a dream she'd had involving a talking squirrel. Marcus and I exchanged a look over her head, a look of shared amusement, of secret, nascent intimacy. It felt like a stolen moment, a glimpse into a future I hadn't known I wanted. After breakfast, I knew the conversation had to happen. I found my phone and my purse, the symbols of my other life. I walked out onto the front porch, where he was sipping a cup of coffee, watching Maya chase a butterfly in the yard. "I have to make some calls," I said, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. He nodded, his eyes searching my face. "Are you leaving?" I looked from his steady, questioning gaze to my phone, a sleek black rectangle that held an entire world of pressure and expectation. I thought of the endless meetings, the sterile conference rooms, the crushing weight of always having to be in control, always having to be perfect. Then I looked at him, at the weathered wood of the porch railing beneath his hand, at his daughter laughing in the sun-drenched yard. I unlocked my phone and dialed my second-in-command. "Jessica," I said, my voice clear and firm, "I need you to clear my schedule for the next 2 weeks. No, it's not an emergency. It's the opposite. I'm taking a vacation. Yes, I'm serious. You can handle it. I trust you." I ended the call and set the phone down on the porch swing. I turned back to Marcus. The surprise and hope on his face made my heart ache in the best possible way. "My car is fixed," I said softly, "but I think I might be a little broken. And I hear you know a patient mechanic." A slow, brilliant smile spread across his face, the one that lit him up from the inside out. He didn't say anything. He just held out his hand. I walked over and took it, my fingers lacing through his. His hand was large and warm and strong, his callous skin a comforting friction against mine. It felt like an anchor in a storm I was finally ready to let pass. Standing there, holding his hand, I knew I wasn't running anymore. I was staying. I was choosing this quiet, unexpected, beautiful place. And for the first time, I felt the unmistakable, terrifying, and exhilarating sensation of hope.